Welcome to the Homestead Pantry Challenge for this evening. Today we are going Mediterranean, so what we're working with is Tuscan shrimp. Now this recipe I got on Pinterest, but it's not going to be like the original recipe. And basically what I'm going to be teaching here is when we start, which so far we have plenty, don't get me wrong, we could still make this challenge. But in certain areas, we do not have plenty. So we're going to learn to improvise. And this is what I'm going to work with today. This recipe calls for basically a lot of sun-dried tomatoes along with other tomatoes. And to me, that seems to be an awful lot of tomato. So I'm actually going to improvise this because most part of it is it's using the olive oil from the sun-dried tomatoes, which I do not have. And so what I am going to do is over the summer, I took my peels when I was canning my tomato sauce, and I actually saved them and I dehydrated them. So I'm going to be using tomato powder in place of the flavoring for the sun-dried tomato oil. So I'm going to be taking the amount of the olive oil that it calls for, and I'm going to be mixing it with tomato powder. So therefore it would resemble the same thing as what the recipe would say. And also, mamas, this is a good way if the kids don't like vegetables or somebody doesn't really like vegetables. This is a good way to actually add this to soups, stews, or sauces. Nobody would know you added it and they're still getting their vitamins. Just a kind of a brief little hint for you. So what I'm starting out with, I'm actually going to be using pre-cooked shrimp because that is what I have. The recipe calls for raw large shrimp, about a pound of it, so I'm going to be using the pre-cooked. When I turn around and cook this in my frying pan, my skillet, I'm just actually going to heat it up just for the flavor and heat those flavors up. So currently, I am going to add a tablespoon to this pound of shrimp of olive oil. And to get that tomato flavor, I'm going to be adding, I'm going to say approximately 1 to 2 teaspoons of tomato powder so that I can mix this all together. So the original recipe is 1 tablespoon of the sun-dried tomato powder, or the sun-dried tomato oil that's going to be mixed with this, but I'm going an extra step with what I do have. So like I said, this video is basically learning improvisations. I'll be using that in a minute again. So now I'm going to try it 1 teaspoon, see where I like this. 1.5 teaspoons, and that would cover what I'm looking for. So now I'm just going to mix these together. And that's your sun-dried, or the sun-dried tomato olive oil effect as well. So we're just going to mix this. And I will return as soon as I get the rest of my ingredients. Okay, so now that we've mixed this up really well, we've incorporated those tomatoes in here. Let that olive oil soak this up some and rehydrate that tomato powder. I am going to be adding a 1/2 teaspoon each of garlic powder, onion powder, and salt. So with our 1/2 teaspoon, we're going to go with our salt. Again, Himalayan sea salt. You can choose to do less. I am going to do less on this one. A 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder. 1/2 teaspoon of onion powder. 1 a 1/4 teaspoon of paprika, and a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. Now I'm going to blend this all together. Let this marry for just a moment while I add about a tablespoon or 2 each of olive oil, and the recipe calls for butter. I'm actually going to be using homemade ghee, so this is clarified butter, so I'm going to be using this. It's easier on your digestive system too, so, and it helps to lower cholesterol. Just in all areas, it's an all-around healthier side of the meal. So I'm going to get these started, and I shall be right back. Okay, so at this point, we're going to go ahead and fry up the shrimp now that it is marinated quite well. I let it sit for about 10 minutes to get all these seasonings. I also added about a 1/4 teaspoon of red pepper flakes to this mix too. So I'm going to set this up so you can see this better, and we're going to start with our next steps. Okay, so our pan is now heated up. We have a tablespoon each of olive oil and ghee. Now I'm going to add the shrimp, and with me, I'm actually just going to heat this up because this shrimp is pre-cooked. I'm just going to get that flavor in this pan. And heat these seasonings up with each other. I'm just going to mix this up and get it nice and hot. And then I'll be transferring them back into my bowl. Now this recipe also calls for cornstarch. I am not using cornstarch in this. So like I said, I'm going to use a lot of variations to create that same Tuscan, but not the exact same recipe. So I'm basically recreating this entire recipe. I'll be using ingredients that we have dehydrated, we have on hand in the freezer, preserved, like the turkey stock that I'm fixing to use, some of the seasonings that I've dried. So using what we have in the pantry. So I'm going to go ahead and get this cooked down, get some of the juice out of here, and I shall be back for the next step, which will be making our sauce. Okay, so now that the shrimp is heated through, I'm going to transfer them to a bowl. I'm also going to reserve this juice that is in here to use that towards my broth for that Tuscan flavor, because again, we did not use the juice from actual sun-dried tomatoes, so I'm going to keep this where I have that flavor still in my broth. So I'm going to take this and transfer it over where I can reserve this broth. I'm going to turn my heat down at this point. That broth gave me about a 1/2 cup, so my stock calls for 1 cup, so I'll be doing 1/2 and 1/2. So now I'll be adding, again, a tablespoon of ghee, and a tablespoon of olive oil. And this is where we're going to saute our onions, or shallots, whatever you prefer, and garlic. Now I'm going to be using about 4 cloves of garlic in this. So I'm going to wait till this comes and down and melts. Even the ghee at homemade has a beautiful nutty flavor without all those preservatives. And some people store it on their shelf. I basically store mine in the fridge, but it will last me a very long time. So, and if I get low, I know how to do it again, so I'll find butter on sale and restock my stocks. So now we're going to go ahead and add our onions and garlic. And I did these backwards, but you get the point. And I just want to saute these up. You don't want to get the garlic too brown because it'll end up having a bitter flavor. Instead of a shallot, I'm actually using some purple onions in this. I'm just going to stir this up until the onions are translucent and tender, and then I'm going to begin to add the broths and the other creams and such in it. At this point though, I can now add the seasonings, and I'm going to be using some parsley, I'm adding a teaspoon of parsley and a teaspoon of basil. I'm also going to be adding some oregano to this. Alright, I'm going to have to go get my fresh oregano. Okay, so now we're going to add a half a teaspoon of oregano. I'm going to saute this together. These onions are just about ready, where I can go ahead and start adding my broth. Now I'm going to go ahead and finish adding that half a cup of the juice that I had from the Tuscan. And then another half cup of our home canned turkey stock. This will be refrigerated afterwards for another meal, or even just for lunch, for just to heat up some broth with. And this is unsalted, by the way, so now we're going to let this cook down just a bit, and I will bring you back for the next steps. Okay, so our spaghetti squash was pre-cooked. We are actually using this in replace of pasta. The recipe said you could serve it over mashed potatoes, rice, or pasta. We're choosing a variant of using spaghetti squash. So I'm just going to take this right now. I cut it in 3, and I did it in rounds, and I'm just going to shred this. After I'm through, I will show you how this will resemble in a lot healthier and safer manner of a pasta form that we can use for this dish. So I will bring you right back as soon as I get this finished as well. So now we have our pasta for supper tonight. I love how this strings up just like regular spaghetti. So our sauce now has thickened up some. Bring this out so you can see this. This is how I'm going to prevent using cornstarch for this recipe. So I allowed this to cook down some. I'm going to add some half cherry tomatoes in here for the color. Now, if I had it, I would be adding fresh baby spinach as well to this. We don't have any, so we're going to go without it. I may end up getting some later, but for right now, this is what we're going to do. And now I'm going to also add 1 cup of heavy cream to this. Get this cream incorporated in here, and then I'll be also adding about 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese to this as well. So I'm going to get this mixed up, heated through. It smells so good, y'all. I'm going to bring this sauce back up to a simmering point where it will melt our cheese then. So as soon as it reaches that point, I'll bring you back for adding the cheese. Okay, so now our sauce is simmering. I'm not sure if you can see that too well, but it's actually kind of bubbling up some. So now we're going to add our Parmesan in here. Get this all melted. This will help also thicken that sauce, giving that good Tuscan Italian flavor. Once this is all melted, just like that. Since I did grate it finely on the smaller end, it won't take long to melt. So now at this point, I'm going to add my shrimp that we sauteed earlier. Get this heated through. And that's it, y'all. That's supper. Once I get all this finished and I will get it plated up, I will show you the end product of what it looks like. Again, I wished I had some spinach or any of the type of greens, but I don't, so I'll be happy with what I have. So once I get this plated up, I'll bring you back to see the final dish and how you can make a improvised shrimp Tuscan supper, Mediterranean style. I have a blueberry muffin recipe coming up soon. I will probably be posting that tomorrow, where you can make some low carb. These are about 5 grams a piece, low carb blueberry muffins. These were made from the jars of blueberries that I canned with. They're absolutely amazing, and for being low carb, using almond flour, there is no, which I liked, no xanthan gum in this recipe. They came out moist, they came out delicious. This is a keeper. Even hubby said that we're going to go ahead and hang on to. So this recipe and this video will be coming out tomorrow. So let me go ahead and get this finished up, get this plated up. I will show you the final, and I shall be right back with you. And there we have it, our pantry challenge, Mediterranean style shrimp Tuscan, and served over yellow squash, or actually spaghetti squash. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it gives you some ideas that maybe you can use for yourself. If you don't have it, improvise. And I will teach you various ways throughout the years. if should come up again, to keep learning how to improvise foods when you don't have it, and use what you have and use what you preserved. So until next time, much love. I look forward to seeing you again. We'll see you next time on Parton's Heritage Homestead.